Phil Longo has been let go as the Badgers head coach or offensive coordinator. Let's talk about what's next the rest of the season, what this means for the quarterback room going forward, all of that and more. Locked On Badgers live edition. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you as always for tuning in. Really do appreciate all you guys. We got Justin, Rajiv. Guys, breaking news, live news. You guys he just hit on your show as well. Phil Longo has been let go as the Badgers offensive coordinator, effective immediately. We are going to talk about in this show what that might mean for the quarterback room, what that might mean for the rest of the season, who might come next, big picture thoughts. Guys, I feel like we all thought this was going to happen. I didn't expect it to happen in season, though. Guys, where are you at on this?
Yeah, I'm really shocked that it happened with 2 games left in the season. But I think it's a very bold move. I think Fickell's clearly, put it down, saying, look, like, we need change and we're doing it now. I think it brings up a lot of questions as to why it's happening right now. Does that mean that, Luke Fickell really wants Mabry to start the next 2 games? There's a lot of discussion about that. I think that, there's just so much to unpack here, but it's not a surprise that it happened, but it is a surprise that it happened with 2 weeks to go. I think one of the most interesting things is it's going to, and it should energize the team. Like, what does this do for the players in the locker room that may have been out on Longo? And you've got 2 very winnable, very big games to finish off the season strong, to go 7-5, which is a big deal to me. It's a big deal to all of us to be able to have that streak continue. More importantly, the future of this program now. For 23 games, we've been watching the Phil Longo experiment just not really work, except for a couple games. So to actually now look ahead, you talk about hype, you talk about excitement. Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at what's next for the Badgers. And Luke Fickell made a decisive move. I give him credit for that. And this is going to be a very interesting week for this team.
Yeah, I made a point on saying this on our show, Rajiv, that this, to me, at this point in time happening, makes me question whether he has his guy in mind. Because if you have somebody in mind, why wouldn't you just finish out the rest of the season and make the change in the offseason? This, to me, is let's get out in front of it and give ourselves an opportunity to make it, everyone aware that we're looking, and see who's out there and see if we can attack this quickly and get our person in line for next year. I could be wrong on that. It could be that there's some other questions on there. Mabry, as you kind of brought up, might be part of the deal here. I honestly think that Locke lost the locker room last night. I think the level of play that was in that game, it was clear to me that people were extremely frustrated with how poorly he played. And the offense as a whole, I thought, outside of him, played well enough to win that game. And he just wasn't able to execute. And if there was some dissension there between Fickell and Longo in terms of making a change there, I look at it and I'm like, what do you have to lose? Like, if that's the level of quarterback play that you're getting, that is, like I said in ours, we saw that stat line. That stat line actually made him look like he played better than he actually did in the game. And he was awful. Like, he was 12 of 28. Like, he should have had another pick. He had a ball he had a fumble to start the game that isn't really taken into account. And he was completely ineffective. Like, there's nothing, you can't tell me that you can't at least use Mabry's mobility to do some positive things on offense.
Will Hannah says, unfortunately, no truth to the rumor that he will be replacing Longo. A couple of things, like Rajiv, you hit on it too. And Justin, you and I have talked about Mabry as well. Rajiv, you hit on it, like excitement, right? Remember how excited we were for Longo. Remember how excited we were for Phil Longo, because we all were. That was looked at upon a home run hire. Who's going to get quarterbacks? Look at what he's done. I think we need to be very clear on this. This is the most important hire of Luke Fickell's.
Oh, absolutely. He's out if he misses on this.
He gets one more shot. He gets one more shot at filling this OC with something that's going to bring back Wisconsin identity, have an identity on offense. This is it. Like, he missed on Longo. Okay, do it now. Get it right. Take the time to get it right.
Because ultimately, you're right. Decisive move, but this is also on Fickell for hiring the wrong OC.
Yep.
Like,
absolutely. That's why you get one more shot.
So, like, decisive move, I agree. I don't know how much is solved doing it 2 weeks left in the season, but either way, I'm good with it. This passing offense is 14th in the Big Ten by a number of metrics. Phil Longo wasn't brought in to revamp the running game. He was brought in to revamp the passing game. He was brought in to bring our quarterback, our throw game into the modern century, and it is de-evolved with Phil Longo. So this was a move that had to happen, but boy, Luke Fickell, man, you have to nail this hire. And as we all say,
that makes it so interesting because you look at this, and the fact of the matter simply is he's probably not going to get super risky with this. We've talked about it from a Gino Guidugli, and I don't see that happening because he's just not proven enough. And Fickell has to have somebody that has some cachet, so to speak, in the offensive coordinator realm. And he also can't afford to take a risk on somebody that he doesn't know and trust. So it's going to be really interesting to see who he goes out there and hires, unless he finds somebody who, I hate to say it because that's what Phil Longo technically was, somebody who has proven themselves already. I keep seeing people drop Moorhead as a potential guy out there. He's a possibility. Joe Moorhead is somebody I could see them potentially thinking about because he's done it in the Big Ten and been productive before. The question is, he's also somebody who has a tendency to jump ship the second a better offer happens. And I think if you're Fickell, you want somebody that's going to provide some stability too. You don't want somebody that, if he has one great year, might turn that into a job somewhere else as a head coach.
Well, you also want somebody who has. We talked about this before. Let's shift to quarterbacks quick. I think that's maybe the next question. What happens to the quarterback room? I think the locks are gone. If I'm just being honest, I think we talked about it before the show. I don't think younger Landon Locke is coming. I think Braden Locke might move on. Mabry Metzger is the interesting one. Two-part question. I want to kick it to you guys. A, does he start next week? Does Mabry Metzger start next week? And B, do you see him around next year?
I think he does start next week, just because I feel like I think we talked about it on our show. We were already thinking about whether or not he should be starting next week, given the horrific performance that we saw last night from Braden Locke. And I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think he starts, and I think he is on the roster next year because Luke Fickell needs to take his time with this. I don't think we need to make a super conservative hire. We need to really take our time. There's a lot of young offensive coordinators are out there. There's a lot of teams doing a lot of cool things. Really need to find someone that fits the identity of this team. And if Mabry's a part of that, then Mabry's a part of that because we haven't seen him yet. We don't know. We were hyped about him coming in. He's certainly more mobile than Locke is. I want to see him out there. You've got nothing to lose at this point. Put him out there. Yes, we have those two games that we could potentially lose, but we don't have our coordinator anymore. There's zero reason to leave Locke in the starting lineup at this point. Pull him out. Let's get Mabry in there and let's see what he can do. And I think that'll go a long way in determining if he's going to be here next year, but certainly who the coordinator is and what kind of style of offense Fickell's really going to try to move towards now is going to be the ultimate decider. But I absolutely think he starts.
Well, there are reports, just to get this out there for people that are wondering, that Nate Letton's going to be the guy who's going to be calling plays, which is really interesting because I'm not aware of him having any previous OC or play calling experience. I know he's been with Fickell since the Cincinnati days. He was a tight end coach there. So it'll be really interesting to see from that standpoint. Clearly there's a level of trust there that he just is comfortable that Letton will do what he expects.
Hey, we've all called plays, Justin. Everybody's played Generation EA Sports.
Maybe that they're playing in the office, and he's like, "I really like the flow you've got going in NCAA football 25." The other thing I will say on that is, listen, it's going to be a really interesting. I think Mabry starts because, like I said, I think that they lost the room in that last game. The last couple of weeks, Locke has just been awful, and I think that there's some things you can do with Mabry in this game that will you can simplify the game a little bit with him. But my biggest takeaway, if we're talking about who he's going to bring in as a potential replacement following this, I think you're going to see somebody who has a dynamic run game that they're going to target. It's going to be somebody that he feels like, listen, we're going to be capable of being physical, but we're also going to have a dynamic enough run game that teams are going to be uncomfortable with us running the football, and we're going to play the passing game off of that, where we're going to have some ability to kind of put defenses into a bind more than Longo's offense did, because let's be honest, the offense was super simple from a run standpoint. And I think that frustrated Fickell, that what we saw was the teams like Iowa that are super physical What Iowa decided was we're just going to be really physical with you, and we're just going to blow up your run. And we're going to let the linebackers flow to it and stop you. And the goal is to create some deception in that run game so that you can't do that as easily, and that you could potentially cause some issues where guys get too aggressive and you get some run or some cutback lanes and stuff like that where you can break some runs. And I think that that's what he's looking for, is somebody that's going to really understand how you need to run offense in the Big Ten.
Well, I think we all talked about it. Everything was just too simplistic with Phil Longo. It was too easy to scheme against it.
Yeah.
Passing schemes were really simple, and the running games were really simple. And it was just like, if we have more talent, it's going to work. But we're not always going to have more talent. We talked about it.
You're not going to be able to out-athlete most of the teams on our schedule.
You got to outflank teams. Like some of the stuff Oregon's, I'm like, not only do they have elite talent, but gosh, I wish we could be creative like that too. You can't have more talent and be more creative, right? Like we have to be able to do one of those two things against an Oregon.
I mean, the fact that we said the word creative, yeah.
Right. But I do want to hit that. Oh no, Rajiv, I think you're hitting on my point there.
Yeah, I was just going to say the number of times that we said creativity on our show, this show, like how the word creativity has been used so much because there was such a lack of it. And whatever happens, we move forward. We better have some creativity. We have to do it.
We're going to talk about that coming up next, including who might be the next target. I want to tell I agree with these guys that I think Mabry should start. I'm going to tell them why I think it might not be Mabry. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. Listen, these guys will attest to this. It takes a lot of energy to be a fan. It would be a lot easier at times in life, just from an energy standpoint, if, I don't know, we were building model trains together. I feel like that'd be less stressful, but we don't. And because of that, 5-Hour Energy will fuel your fandom with their limited edition Stand the Fan 5-Hour Energy 12-pack available on 5hourenergy.com, ship nationwide. 5-Hour Energy knows that no matter what you're doing, it takes energy, it takes heart, it takes soul. You got to set up the tailgate, coordinate with the friends, buy the wings, get the beer. And that's just before the game. 5-Hour Energy will help you absolutely power through the game day experience with their 5-Hour Energy. Grab your Stand the Fan 5-Hour Energy shot. Keep you fueled throughout the season. Whatever your fan fuel is, whatever it is you need it for, is over there at 5hourenergy.com. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. Today's episode also brought to you by our great friends over at FanDuel. Our Gametime, I apologize. Any tickets you need, Gametime. I had tickets lined up for the Arizona game. I should have just powered through and done it. I was dog sitting. I should have brought the dog with me and left him in the parking lot. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
PETA is now coming after Ryan.
I love dogs. I would never do it. Part of me regrets it. Anyway, I would have got those tickets on Gametime. Best deals, best tickets. You can get everything on Gametime. Quick, easy, fast, simple. Gametime. Snake the tickets without stress over on Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Snake the tickets without the stress. Gametime, code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. You can create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. All right, let's jump back into this. I'm going to tell these guys why I agree with them, but I'm not sure it's going to happen. So I agree. I think Mabry should play. I'm sorry. You're not going to get worse than 12 of 28, and you might as well get the young guy reps. I think Luke Fickell is by nature a conservative guy, and I remember our conversation specifically last year when Tanner Mordecai was hurt and hadn't been playing very well, and every single one of us said, don't put him back in there, play Braden Locke. Braden Locke had a couple games, even the Ohio State game where he played pretty well, and then what did they do as soon as they could get Tanner Mordecai back in there? They went with him. I think Luke Fickell is going – I don't know if they're going to turn to Mabry. I think they're going to say we got these next two games, and he's still a freshman.
Where I'll push back on that to an extent is we have no idea what was actually happening in practices. And that's where we can kind of lean on that with this too. I have no idea what the gap looks like in practice with Mabry and Locke. It's possible he's taken several steps and looks competent at this point. What I will say is you don't have to have a super dynamic playbook with him. Mabry's mobility provides some things that you don't have with Locke. And some of that is you could simplify the game plan, and just his physical tools creates some flexibility with angles on the field that you don't have with Locke, which is you have the ability in the passing game to get him opportunities to make throws that you couldn't do with Locke simply because we talked about it, Ryan, you and I, it's like a point guard in basketball. The truly great ones understand angles and how to be able to get the ball to a guy where a defender just can't make a play. It's the same way in passing in football. If you're somebody who has the ability to create that angle, you can save yourself a lot of risk in the passing game by just having guys not be able to make plays. Locke can't create that. You have some of that with Mabry because of his length. He's a guy with big time size.
I think
with you. I'm just not sure the coaching staff is going to make the move.
I hear your point, Ryan, and I think you very well could be right because, obviously we want to get to the bowl game. We want to do that, so maybe that's the best chance. But given the stat line that we saw from him last night, I think that is obviously was a big driver in getting rid of Longo yesterday or this morning or whenever it happened. But I also think that there's got to be that message too. I mean, he was 12 of 28. He was absolutely horrendous. You guys covered it last night. We just covered it on the Bucky Report. It's bad. It's almost a perfect opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to go with another guy. We're going to go because, like, if you get rid of Longo and then you throw him back out there with that kind of performance, I mean, a QB with any kind of decent stat line, we just beat the number one team in the country. That was pathetic per quarterback play. I think it's really hard to send him back out there after firing Longo and after that performance with 2 games to play, at least with Mabry. If we're potentially going to lose him next year, we got to see what he has. I just think at this point, Fickell has to do it. I do hear your point. I think it's very fair and logical to think that he won't do it, but given that performance last night, I think that tips it over the edge.
I just also think that there's something to be said for the fact that it seems pretty clear that I feel like Locke lost the team yesterday with his performance. And you could just see it, the body language of people around him when they showed him on the sidelines and stuff like that. And people were talking about it that were actually at the game saying nobody's near him, nobody's talking to him or anything like that. And I think everyone realized these guys put their guts out last night on that field, and they felt like it was taken away from them by one guy not being able to make plays or at least do anything to give them a chance. And when you play that well as a defense and you play that hard, it is so hard to not get frustrated and get angry at that other player and feel like they're holding you back. So we've all played sports. It happens. You get out there, and if you consistently have one guy on the team that you feel like is undercutting you and keeping you from being successful, it's really hard not to get frustrated with that guy.
I would push back a little bit there, though, because I don't think he's not undercutting them. He's just not physically good enough, right?
That's what I'm saying. If you're playing really well and somebody else is constantly making errors,
that's not on him, though, right? That's on the coaching staff at that point.
It is. My point is, the coaching staff has to make a change because that guy's not capable of doing their job.
I agree. So again, I am in team play Mabry, 100%. I just am not sure it's going to happen. So I'm with you. I am not arguing to continue the Locke experiment because that roller coaster doesn't have an up. It's just keeps going down. No up on that roller coaster. We just
but don't you think that's the reason it is going to happen? Because of how bad it was last night?
But again, we had a very similar conversation last year.
It's like a dial-up internet company coming to market and trying to sell stock.
I just know Luke Fickell is a conservative coach by nature. We know that. That was coming from Cincinnati. I know desperately this team wants to get to a bowl game. They need to. I could see them saying, if we just run the ball, at least we know Locke. Again, I'm not making an argument for Locke, and we can move on from this point because I think we all are on the same page. But I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. I'll say that.
But it's an interesting discussion, right? Because it's when you first said it, I was like, oh, I guess I kind of agree with him. He might not do it, but I just feel like if he was going to keep Locke in, then it's almost like why even fire Longo right now? I just think that it would be weird to get rid of one and not the other. I think that's the thing. It's it just seems odd to be like, okay, we're firing your OC, but you can still quarterback the team for the next 2 weeks, even after last night. That just seems odd. Frankly, I think I'll be shocked, but I will say this. I will be very disappointed if Braden Locke is our starter next week, given the fact that we just fired. I mean, we were already
just no upside,
and I will be really disappointed, honestly, if we don't start Mabry now, given this firing.
I want to read this one out here from Jay Leon. What QB is going to want to come here that has talent after the offense changes back to running? We're not advocating going back to the prior Wisconsin style. We're talking more power spread, an offense that is predicated on being able to run a dynamic power running game, but also is still pass oriented. If you want to do this right, Fickell, if you want to actually have extreme success, you can't go to just a straight running game. It's not effective enough. You cannot run that style of offense and be able to win games against the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Georgias and Alabamas of the country. So, I mean, those teams are going to be able to stop you if you're too run heavy. You have to be able to pass the football. It almost has to be like dynamic enough that you can do either one of them to win a game. But what we do need is we need a more diverse run game that is capable of making a defense uncomfortable. And it was not the case with what Phil Longo brought.
I mean, I just want to say, I know a lot of it's in jest and there, but even whether it's this Discord, there's so many places where the name Paul Christ is being brought up.
Let me pull the comments really quick.
Many places. I would like to just say, no, thank you on this. No, thank you. Not interested. I think as an offensive coordinator, he actually, that some of his best years was when he
got more and more conservative as the years went on.
I just don't feel like that's the step to make for this. I know people are talking about it. I know it's out there. Just my opinion. Even if, like, I know he was a good OC, but that's just not the step that I think Fickell is going to take, nor should he make, in my opinion.
Really quick on Paul Christ. You guys watch The Lord of the Rings at all? You know that bridge where they like destroy it? Like, this is the bridge between Paul Christ and Chris McIntosh.
None shall pass.
That none shall pass. I'm telling you, that bridge didn't get burned. That bridge is napalmed. It is what it is. I think both people might want to handle that differently.
You mean that Chris and McIntosh are like on friendly terms?
I'm telling you,
they're hanging out, having drinks, and going out to brunch.
Even if you were interested, and even if Luke Fickell wanted to run that type of offense, that bridge is napalmed. Sorry. Nothing against either guy. That's not happening. Let's shift recruiting really quick. Quarterback room. We talked about the locks. We talked about Mabry. You obviously have Jaron Mock in the pipeline as well. Carter Smith was here for a visit. We have other offensive recruits. What do you guys think in terms of players that may leave the program or impact on recruiting with Phil Longo? Eugene Hilton out there. Any impacts here, guys, that you think? Justin,
I think it's a big risk. Obviously, the name that comes to my mind first is Eugene Hilton. Like, that to me is someone who we were really excited about, and I don't know how involved Longo was in his recruiting specifically, but yeah, I think anytime you lose the OC, you're going to lose guys. We know the locks are gone. That's easy enough, I think, to all know and understand. But I think that's where Fickell's got to show his prowess, and you got to come in here and step in and make sure that you are on the phone with each one of these guys. If you still want them, to make sure you lock them in. I mean, signing day is not that far. Like, this is a really critical period here for him to lock in the guys that he wants and to let go of the guys that he doesn't want. Find replacements if necessary. But I've always had every confidence in Fickell's recruiting. And I think we've seen that the entire staff, I mean, even hearing that Carter Smith is still potentially even available and out there and potentially not committed fully to Florida State, like that'd be a big get. I always like their closing ability, and I have every confidence that he's going to be able to keep the guys that are going to fit what he wants. He did this week for a reason. Now, we don't really know what that is yet, but whether that's for Mabry, whether that's to prepare for National Signing Day, to make sure the recruits understand what's happening. Like, there's a lot of things behind the scenes as to why he chose right now to do it. And from call it blind faith, I've every confidence when it comes to recruiting for him to do what's right. So I'm actually not as concerned that we're going to lose the guys we really want, because if there's one thing he's proven to do well, it's that side of the sport and of his job.
Yeah, one of the things I'll say flat out is I was not enamored with the type of targets that we saw, other than Mabry, that Phil Longo seemed to target. And we talked about this, Ryan and I, over the last couple of days. Like, I want somebody loose and athletic at the quarterback position. Like, give yourself somebody who gives you some options. And that's just not the case. And the last thing I want to hear from a college coordinator is he processes at a really high level coming out of high school, because it doesn't matter. Like, you go from having 5 seconds to throw the football to 2 seconds when you get to college. It's a completely different ball game. It's meaningless if you racked up stats in high school. A lot of those guys, we've seen 5 stars that turn into nothing. What I want is the guy to come in and have physical tools that give him more opportunity to be able to prove himself. And the more athletic you are, the more room for error it gives you as a quarterback. Now, whether you're able to process or not, we'll find that out when you get into a college scheme. But there are tons of guys who are 2 stars that are just loose athletes that get there and suddenly it clicks. And it's like, wow, it would be really nice to just take the risk on a guy who's athletic and see what they come. Ryan, you have experience with Trey Lance.
Yeah, you talk about roller coasters that don't have any ups. There's another one as a Niner fan. In the college, you would love a Trey Lance in the college realm for sure.
Absolutely.
And to your point, man, like how many times have we played a team, Dylan Gabriel last night, right? Where he just makes a play with his legs. You got to have mobility in college football in 2024, 25. You just need it, period. Enough. And I'll say this too. People are really worried, and I think it's a fair worry. I think Mabry honestly could be gone. When I talked to Mabry, he said, I was going to North Carolina until Longo went to Wisconsin. He might leave. But offensive coordinators have their own quarterback connections. Yeah. When you're bringing a guy in, like, yes, Longo may be connected to Mabry, but whoever you're bringing in is going to be connected to other quarterbacks too. So I always say this, and I think it's paramount. Get the coaches right, and they'll find the right players. Don't stress so much for 1 year if you lose Mabry Metoyer. I don't want to lose him. I think Mabry could be really good. But if it means you hire the right offensive coordinator, that's far more important for the next 5-10 years.
Absolutely.
Period.
What I will say about Gino Guidugli is people are talking.
Oh, sorry.
What I will say about Gino.
Well, let me put it really quick. It's like right. If you build it, they will come. It's the same thing. If you hire the right coach, they will come. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So what I will say about Gino Guidugli is he is a plus recruiter. And I do think that he's a guy that values athleticism at the position. I question whether there's a couple of ways of looking at him as a potential candidate. And I think one of them is this. He's a guy that Fickell has experience with, so he probably trusts him from that standpoint. The question I have is, does Fickell trust him enough to run his offense at this level in the Big Ten? Like, we're not at Cincinnati anymore. It's going to be a little bit different ball game doing it here. And I think that was one of the things you learned with Longo here. Like, you need somebody that understands the Big Ten and is capable of running a functional offense at this level and able to make plays. And if you can't do that, it is going to be your job on the line. Like, the offense does not have to be great. How many games do we win this year if the offense is simply competent? Probably 8.
I don't know if we beat any. Like, Iowa scored 42 on us, and I don't know if we beat Oregon.
I think if the offense is competent against Penn State, you can make an argument where we win that game.
Sure.
I think you can make an argument against USC if the offense is competent.
It's definitely better, right? For sure. To your point, Rajiv, I want to kick this to you because Justin and I have been playing yo-yo with the conversation here. Wake me up when a running quarterback wins anything. Give me the pocket passer.
No, I absolutely want an athletic. You can be both. And we've seen that now that the more that the sport evolves, you can have someone who has a really great pocket passer who can also use his legs. It's also about using your legs to become a better pocket passer. How many times have we complained about the lack of finding passing lanes that Braden Locke has had time and time again? Oh, he had to throw an interception last night because he had to have that. And that's what he did on the last play too. He's not using his legs properly to actually find the passing lane. So I want a mobile quarterback that can, you got to have someone that can pass the ball. I'm not about having a quarterback that's not a good passer.
Nobody's talking about it like a true dual threat that's going to run 50%.
Right. It's just about being mobile enough to create the threat to improve the running game and mainly to use your legs to actually create more passing lanes.
Absolutely.
And when you need to, you got to be able to take it off. It's so critical. Like, we need to have the mobile quarterback because you're right. You guys said it. It's where the game is going now. I mean, look at who's the best quarterback in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes. Like, look what he does, right? Mm-hmm. Look what he's able to do to create those passing lanes, to use his legs, keeping his eyes downfield. And frankly, we saw it last year with Tanner Mordecai. Like, he was a very mobile quarterback that put us in really good positions. And I'm not saying he was the end all be all, but I just feel like we need to have that. It's really critical when you have a guy like Braden Locke. How many times did he pull on that read option? He doesn't, and he did a couple times against Iowa. Like, you had no threat there, and it just meant that the defense knew you were one dimensional. They knew exactly what they could defend against, and when you have that mobile quarterback, it changes everything. And yeah, I agree with your point, Ryan. Going back to what you said earlier about if you build it, they will come. I think it's all about getting this hire right. I do not want Luke Fickell to jump into this quickly and make a quick hire. Like, take the time. If Letton's going to take over for a couple weeks, fine. If Mabry's going to play for a couple weeks, fine. But find the right guy. I mean, a lot of people, I've heard a lot of the name, the guy from UNLV, his name's Brendan Marion. You know, obviously out here, everyone's going crazy about UNLV offense. Like, it is really something. The go-go offense is what they call it. There's a lot of good coordinators out there. Take the time to vet out who you want. And that guy will bring in the recruits. That's why I said about the signing day, like understand who's on that list for signing day and who you really need to keep. And Luke Fickell will work those guys and let the other guys go, because that's going to happen. And you're going to get more with the transfer portal with whoever OC you bring in. But this hire has to be right. He needs to take his time and figure out what does he want the offensive identity of this team to be, and someone who's going to mesh with all the other coaches and mesh with this team. This is an incredibly important time for the future of this program.
Well, and I just want to kind of give a little bit of what I mean by athlete at quarterback. Ryan and I were talking about this, offline previously. And I said, I want the kid who plays shortstop in high school, because that's a kid that can run around and make plays. And he's not necessarily a running quarterback, but he's a guy that has mobility. And he also understands being able to just kind of make throws and stuff like that aren't on platform. Like, you have some ability to kind of make a variety of throws, because baseball forces you to make those awkward kind of throws to make plays. I want the guy who can do some of that stuff and has that level of mobility and can create the angles for himself to make the game simpler. Locke can't do that. Nick Evers isn't necessarily what I mean when I'm talking about that. He's a guy that has plus athleticism, but the quarterback aspect of it is something that you have to question.
But he stinks.
It doesn't have to be that level of mobility. It needs to be a guy that can run a little bit and get you 5-10 yards there when it's open.
Yeah. Jimmy Widemore says Ryan told us all Longo was a home run hire. I sure damn did.
Yep.
We all did. We all thought it was going to be a match made in heaven.
A lot of people. But listen, it's like I respect the fact that he swung for the fence. It didn't work. I also respect the fact that he's changing it, right? It was a mistake. Change it, fix it. What do you think about the other coaches? Do you think there's any other offensive coaches that either go with Longo or aren't here?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I think one we don't want to leave is AJ Blazek. He needs to stay right where he is, because he's doing a great job. No, I think Guyton, obviously, I think it's fine. I think ultimately it's about what the future is and because look, any OC is going to have guys too he wants to bring in. Blazek to me is the one that's untouchable. I don't want him going anywhere. Other than that, if they leave because a new OC wants different guys, I'm okay with that. But I don't necessarily think that we're going to see an exodus because of that. I just think it's all depending on really how much of a different identity the new OC really has.
My gut on this is, unless you have a coordinator that is an absolute stud coordinator, like top guy, they're not going to have the ability to make those type of demands to bring in whatever coaches they want. So I think Fickell's going to keep his hand. He's going to probably be pretty on top of this in terms of it, because I think he feels a ton of pressure, in all honesty. I think Fickell, and a lot of it's probably put on himself, but I think that the way he looks at this is I can't give somebody rope to hang me with. And that's the fear when you bring in a coordinator and you let it happen with Bicknell through Longo. And that absolutely burned him. So I think he's going to be very uncomfortable giving somebody hiring ability unless he knows it's somebody that is trustworthy. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be changes, but it's going to be guys that Fickell that he believes in for the spot.
Jake mentions, was feeling bad until I Googled how much Longo makes. It's $1.25 million per year. He'll be fine.
Yeah,
the reason I want to put
starve.
Yeah, he's going to be okay. And he's going to land on his feet, by the way. He's going to get another job. The reason I put it up there, though, is this is similar to me to a little bit to the Braden Locke stuff. None of this is personal. Like, Longo's being let go because the offense has underperformed. It doesn't mean he's a bad dude. Sometimes it's just bad fits. Same with Locke. I'll give you this. Locke stood up to the media and answered questions. Like, he's accountable. Yeah. But it's not good enough. It's just business, man. And if you're not good enough, the offense has underperformed. The one thing on the coaching I'd bring up is I'm curious. So it depends right on what scheme we shift to. If we shift to a scheme offensively where maybe you demand something different out of the running backs or receivers or tight end, maybe that's where you see a coaching change. Maybe you want to bring someone in that's more familiar with coaching that type of scheme. But I mostly agree. I don't, there's nobody jumps out at me and they're like, yeah, that guy's definitely gone. I think it's a wait and see. And I agree with you too, Justin. I think obviously Fickell's going to be heavily involved in that. But it wouldn't shock me if I'm not throwing any, but if somebody moved on because they're like, this other guy's a better fit for this scheme that we're now implementing. Guys,
I won't disagree with that.
Any final thoughts? We've been at it for 35 minutes, which is incredible. We got 600 people in here. Y'all are amazing. Wherever you watch this show, car, now, live, YouTube, podcast, wherever you watch the Bucky Report as well. We absolutely appreciate everybody. Any last thoughts on this?
I just think, my final thoughts are really just on Fickell. I think like his tenure at Wisconsin is going to be defined by what happens in the next few months. There was a question earlier about whether or not he's on the hot seat now. I think McIntosh obviously was fully aware of this. I think there's a lot of discussion going on with him. Clearly, Wisconsin offense has been poor this year. The identity of the offense is gone. Like there's a lot of changes that are necessary, and what he does with this hire is going to be critical. We talk so much about how Luke Fickell, we were all excited about him coming on. There's been a lot of question marks this year from various fans about whether or not he's the guy, and we've all been very in on him the entire year, and I still am. But this is the step. Like you screwed up the first offensive coordinator. Okay, now it's coming in. If the next one fails, then the next one, it's not going to just be the OC. It's going to be Fickell going with them. So I think it's a really important inflection point of Wisconsin football. And, we've had a lot of things to not be happy about this year. And I think we're all a little bit kind of happy about this. I think we needed a change. And so let's see what happens. But this is a really critical point. Get it right. Take the time, find the right guy, because this will define his career in Madison.
Well, and the reality is, if they get simply good on offense, it changes everything with this team. It takes so much pressure off the defense. It allows Tressel to take a lot more risks on the defensive side. The game gets complicated when you don't have a lot of room for error. Your coaches have to kind of limit what they do simply because they can't take unnecessary risks that could potentially lead to points. And honestly, we called a pretty aggressive defensive game yesterday. I hope we continue that. But if say these next couple of weeks, we can get something out of this offense, and that's the goal going forward. Like, it doesn't even matter if we can be amazing on offense. We just have to be simply good.
And anything better than last night.
No, it has to be like, we want good, we want great, we want them to make a home run higher here. But whatever happens, you cannot have it stay at this level. It's got to at least be an incremental step in the right direction.
Yeah, everything you guys are saying, I agree with. I think it creates hope. I'm still in on Fickell. I think it creates hope. I do think there's been a lot of coaching turnover in Fickell's tenure. Like, on both sides of the ball, we've had people come and go pretty quickly for a guy who's been here a year and a half. Like, you got to kind of build some continuity, which speaks to how big this hire is. But if you look back at the last 5 weeks for Tressel, you have those 3-game stretch where 3 bad Big Ten teams, but they scored 16 points, right? You had Penn State, where I thought the Wisconsin defense played well. Terrible Iowa game, but then they came back and held Oregon to 16. I feel like Tressel is trending this defense in the right. I see the vision there. I really do. So if you compare that with the OC, if he can hit a home run or a really good hire on the OC, I kind of good with this coordinator pairing going to the offseason.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick comment on your coaching turnover thing. I think it's important. Like, a lot of the guys he brought here initially are some of the guys that are gone, like some like but then the hires that he subsequently made, right? Like a Blazek, like a Whitlow, like some of the subsequent hires have actually been pretty good. Mm-hmm. So I do think that again, this is his chance to really step it up with the OC level. But for the most part, some of the early hires, not so much, but everything he's done since then, because he's had time to settle in, understand the university, understand the culture, understand what McIntosh is looking for, all the things. It's really his opportunity to have a reset for himself and to really to take it to the next level. So I'm confident that he'll find the right hire.
Dennis Reynolds says, I think of that look Fickell gave Longo after that play clock violation coming out on first down.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say on this is, do you think that Longo would have been the hire? Now, knowing Fickell getting more ingrained into the Wisconsin system, that he would have, if he had gone back, that would have been the hire he'd made. My gut instinct says no. Like, if he understood what he was getting into more, I don't feel like that's where he would have gone with it. I feel like he would have understood that it's not necessarily the best possible situation.
And maybe I think hindsight is at play there a little bit. Like, Longo came in with a really strong.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it is hindsight. I'm saying if he knew that where we're at now, I think that he clearly would have never gone in that direction, because I think the biggest takeaway we've had from Longo's time here is that it's just not a dynamic enough offense. Like, it's not going to work against top level teams, because you're not going to get, unless you have NFL talent littered all over the place, it's not effective enough.
I think this is a really good comment from Kevin Hess. People worried about losing recruits. You have to realize this coordinator was 96th and 98th in the country. Penn State fired Kirk Sorock after being 12th in the country, and they're better this year. The side avenue I would take from this comment is how much easier is it to sell to recruits if this offense improves? Like right now we're selling, hey, come be here. Our offense is kind of not very good. But come play in this
trying to
sandbox.
build something, yeah.
Right? Come play in this sandbox that's littered with broken beer bottles and drug needles. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Where if you have an offensive coordinator that this offense grows, it looks more explosive. If it's putting up 30, well, suddenly selling recruits for Max and Pat gets a whole hell of a lot easier too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you find the right coach and the recruiting will solve itself quite frankly, especially with this staff. The recruiting is going to solve itself if you find the right coach from an X's and O's and development standpoint. All right, guys, we're at 40 minutes. Again, anything else? Bo Dragon says hire Tanjay. He knows offense. That's a great comment.
I was going to say from just the standpoint of losing recruits, I just don't think – I think people who don't know as much, Longo's really not that big of a factor in the recruiting.
For quarterbacks,
for quarterbacks, yes. But when you look at the rest of the guys that are in that group, he's not really a big factor in terms of the actual recruitment. It's more positional coaches and it's more Max and Pat. Those are the guys that are doing the bulk of the work. Longo is pretty much quarterbacks. So if you get somebody else in who brings their own guys, it doesn't really matter. Like it's not that huge of a deal from that standpoint that you're not going to have like a max exodus in the recruiting class of guys. What the kids that are coming in, like Hilton and them, they just want to know that somebody's coming in that's going to be still make passing a large aspect of the offense, that we're not going to suddenly be running the triple option and he's going to be stuck getting one catch a game.
Rajiv, final thoughts?
Man, what a weekend, by the way. We beat Arizona, have a great night then. We have a horrifyingly tough loss last night. We had the biggest number of recruiting visits we've ever had in one weekend.
40.
Oh, and we fire our offensive coordinator. Like that. This is going to be a weekend that we look back to. It's like this turning point of so many things. Like what an insane 3 days for Wisconsin athletics.
Now nailed the hire. Got nailed the hire.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, guys, on Wisconsin. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Go check out Locked On Big Ten when you're done here. Go check out the Bucky Report as well. That's these guys here on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.